You know, as women, we are always taught to be careful when we go out, look out for strangers, and the goal when we go out alone is to come home safe. Well, Sasha Samsudeen did all that. She came home safe. And that's where the real danger was hiding. Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Zara, and on this channel we talk about true crime. So if you're interested, please join the fam, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button too. It really helps out the channel. And let's jump into today's video. Also, thank you to everyone who voted over on Instagram for today's lip color. It's definitely something that I would gravitate towards, and it's this Rimmel Thrill Seeker Lip Latex, and the shade is Main Character. So if you're interested, that's what it is. Sasha Samsudeen was born on July 4th, 1988 to her parents Ken and Tara, and together with her brother Kenny, she grew up in New York to a loving, happy family, and they eventually moved to Florida where Sasha and Kenny went to high school. Sasha graduated from Seminole High School in Sanford, where she was a member of the Dazzlers dance team. Sasha was well liked and she had a lot of friends, and Sasha was close to her brother Kenny. They would have weekly dinners and always dress up in fancy clothes, and it was their favorite way to spend quality time together. Sasha was known to have a bright personality, was very social and incredibly hardworking. She loved her job and she worked hard and played hard. She moved down to Orlando, Florida in her 20s and worked as a social media manager for an Orlando realtor company. She was the perfect girl for the job. She was extremely bubbly and happy, which drew many people in to finding their dream home.
Hi, I'm Sasha with 407 Apartments TV. We're here at the Village at Science Drive, an American campus community. Let's go check it out.
Sasha moved into the luxury Uptown Place condominiums in Orlando and was excited to be living her life independently. At 27 years old, she was an award-winning charity volunteer and was described as a kind woman with an infectious personality. On the weekends, Sasha liked to go out to bars and restaurants with her friends. On Friday, October 16th, 2015, Sasha went to work as usual and then prepared to head out with her friends after work. Sasha was normally out and about every weekend. She was a social butterfly. So after work that day, Sasha went to a soccer game with friends, and then after they moved on to a popular nightclub called The Attic. This was one of Sasha's favorite clubs, and she had a great time, but by 12:30 a.m., she was tapped out. Sasha was exhausted after a long day of work and headed home. But man, the sound of just being out past 1 a.m., it does not sound good to me. I am so not a social person anymore. I can't believe we even used to go out clubbing that late. But Sasha and her friends were kind of used to always being out that late and kind of club hopping. But on that night, she was done. So Sasha said goodbye to her friends, and one friend in particular, Anthony, was heading to another venue. So he said his goodbyes to Sasha, knowing he would be meeting her for breakfast the next morning. It really wasn't unusual for the group of friends to split up, either head to different venues or just go home. And Sasha went home, and like I said before, that's the most important part of being a girl alone at night. You know, whether it's 1:30 a.m. or 8:30 p.m., you have to be safe. Sasha did drink a little more than she intended to, so she was tipsy, but she left the club by herself and began her 25-minute walk home. On her walk home, two teenage girls saw Sasha. So they either saw her because they were walking down the same street as her, or other reports state that they were actually in an Uber and they saw Sasha walking and they decided to ask her if she was okay. They saw her walking alone. They noticed she was clearly inebriated and she's alone, it's dark, and they were worried about her. So they approached her and they asked her, do you want to share an Uber? Sasha, although tipsy, knew she was probably not in the best condition to be walking that distance alone. So she gratefully accepted their offer. So as the girls waited for their Uber, the girls chatted with each other. And while Sasha was obviously tipsy, she was still lucid. When their car arrived, Sasha told the driver the address to her Uptown Place apartment complex. And when the car arrived at her apartment, the two girls were still a little bit unsure about letting Sasha get in by herself, so they actually got out of the car and walked her to the entrance of the building where the overnight security guard was standing. They just wanted to make sure she got inside safely. And I mean, those girls were girls. Like, I respect women like that so much. The next morning, Anthony arrived at their scheduled cafe for breakfast, but Sasha didn't show, and he waited for her, but she never showed up. She wouldn't answer his calls or any of his texts, so he just assumed that she was really tired or hungover from the night before. So Anthony ordered his breakfast and ate alone. Later that afternoon, Anthony still didn't hear from Sasha. Now, it was weird because Sasha was always on her phone, always on social media. She should have responded by now. So Anthony spoke to another 2 friends, and together they decided to just go and check on Sasha. When they arrived at Sasha's apartment, they saw her car was still parked in the lot. When they looked inside her car, they saw a gift that was wrapped and it was left in the back seat, which was strange because the gift was for a baby shower she was supposed to attend earlier that day. So they went inside the building and knocked on her door. When she didn't answer after several minutes, the friends called the police and requested a welfare check. Police arrived shortly after at 8 p.m. and asked the security guard to let them into Sasha's apartment. The security guard complied and overrode her door code and let the police in. The police looked around and nothing in the kitchen and living areas looked sus or disturbed. And Sasha's door was still locked from the inside. It didn't look like anyone had forced their way in. When they entered her bedroom, there was initially a strong smell of bleach, but then the officers saw it. A hand was hanging down her bed under the sheets, and hair was sticking out of the top of the sheets near the pillows. Lying on the bed, underneath the sheets with one arm sticking out, was the body of Sasha. When the police pulled the sheets back, it was clear that Sasha had been a victim of a brutal attack. Homicide detectives were quickly called to the scene and evidence was collected and photos were taken. The room really stinked of bleach and there were patches of discoloration on her sheets indicating that the bleach was either spilled or poured all over in an attempt to clean up. Sasha had her shirt and bra ripped open. Her underwear was ripped off her in such force that it tore her skin open. She clearly suffered a violent sexual assault. Her necklace was torn from her neck but got stuck, tangled in her hair. She had bruises on her face, strangulation marks on her neck, indicating that she was strangled to death. She had defensive wounds on her arms and her hands, showing that she really had fought for her life. She suffered blunt force trauma to her head and upper and lower abrasions, indicating someone had forcefully restrained her, held her down. The medical examiner would subsequently find that the killer had applied enough pressure to her throat to fracture her larynx. Her body was then doused in bleach. Her killer clearly tried to clean up. Sasha's cleaning cupboard was left open with the room doused in bleach and areas cleaned up in an effort to get rid of any evidence. But try as he may, her killer, a male, left traces of himself. To start, he left the toilet seat up, something that just would not be common in a bathroom that was only used by a woman. Fingerprints were found underneath the toilet seat lid. A condom wrapper and partial shoe prints were located on the bathroom floor. And when swabs were taken from Sasha's chest and neck area, they found foreign DNA. But the fact that there was no forced entry definitely raised some questions. Sasha's apartment keypad lock showed no signs of tampering, but her phone, her purse, and key fob were missing. Police came to the conclusion that Sasha most likely knew her killer. Police then asked the security guard, who happened to be the same security guard those 2 teenage girls left Sasha with on the night she died, if there were any security cameras recording the apartment that night. Now, there were none recording her actual apartment door, but there were around 15 different cameras in different locations, but the camera footage was stored off-site and would take some time to recover. While they waited for this footage to become available, they spoke with the security guard and asked him what he saw on the night that Sasha last came home. The security guard's name was Stephen Duxbury. Stephen was happy to talk to the detectives, but let them know that the last time he saw Sasha was when she was fumbling with her key code outside her apartment. Stephen remembered the 2 teenage girls bringing Sasha to the apartment entrance. However, as they left, he advised Sasha that because she didn't produce a key card or any ID, he was unable to grant her access into her apartment. He then offered to walk her to her car or look for her keys, but as they were walking there, Sasha suddenly remembered her code and then went back inside the building. Stephen then said another tenant let her in. The two teenage girls were tracked down, who explained the events of that night, the Uber ride, and stated that they left Sasha at the entrance of her building with the building's security guard, assuming that she would be safe with the security guard present. Sasha should have been safe once she was inside the building, but she wasn't. Detectives spoke with neighbors hoping that they had seen or heard something unusual. A neighbor came forward saying that on the night he was doing laundry in the middle of the night and he saw Sasha in the hallway and she was being followed by Stephen, the security guard. He thought it was a bit weird and unnecessary that he was following Sasha all the way to her front door because this building was known to be one of the safest in the city. So he kind of just brushed it off. Detectives questioned Stephen about this and he said he last saw Sasha at 3 a.m. when she was wandering the hallways and struggling to get inside her apartment. He then decided to escort her to her actual door. And then after this, he went back to his post. So was he escorting her or was he following her? He said his shift then ended at 6 a.m. and he was unaware of any further details. Two other men who were previously involved with Sasha were interviewed and their DNA was taken, but there was no match. Finally, the security footage was available and it was crucial in finding out who killed Sasha. So the footage showed Sasha at the entrance of the apartment building at about 1:46 a.m. And when she couldn't find her keys to get in and then struggled to input her code, Stephen, the security guard, didn't let her in. It then showed Sasha ducking around the corner, presumably on her way to her car, before she quickly came back and then climbed up the stairwell at 2:06 a.m. So the footage continues to play and they continue to look for signs of Sasha in the footage after this time. And they eventually find what they're looking for. Sasha is seen stumbling through the hallway, but Stephen is following closely behind her. He was essentially tailing her in nearly every frame from that point on. But that was okay, right? That's what Stephen and the neighbor said happened. Except he was seen heading to Sasha's apartment again at 5 a.m. when she would have already made it safely back inside. Maybe he was just making sure she didn't leave again, until they kept scrolling through the footage. A while later, after Stephen's shift already ended. At 6:36 a.m., Stephen is seen once again, this time carrying two white trash bags out of the door toward the second floor parking garage. The white trash bags had a distinctive red trim, the same type of trash bags found in Sasha's bins. Weird, because he said his shift ended at 6 a.m. Wouldn't you just leave after work, especially an overnight shift? They checked his previous security reports and found he never usually did any trash collection during his shifts either. So detectives knew they needed to have one more chat with Stephen. So they asked him to come in for some more questions, and when he did, they noticed scratches on Stephen's hands and a bite mark on his arm. When they searched his phone, they found he made searches on Google just before 5 a.m. He was asking, "Hey Google, how do you override a quick-set lock?" The same type of lock Sasha had installed on her door. Stephen then agreed to take a polygraph test. When he was asked if he ever went into Sasha's apartment, the needle noticeably jumped. When he was asked if Sasha was stabbed, he said no. He passed. When he was asked if Sasha was choked, the needle jumped again. At one point during the test, Stephen asked the lie detector administrator, "Is my heart rate still high?" Stephen was quite visibly shaken in his boots. Stephen's home was searched and shoes that matched a shoe print found in Sasha's bathroom were found. Stephen denied ever stepping foot into Sasha's apartment. He only escorted her to her door. He was making sure she was safe, but he still couldn't explain why his fingerprints were found on her toilet seat. His DNA was found on the toilet seat and the nightstand, and most importantly, Sasha's dead body. On October 30th, 2015, Stephen Duxbury, who had been hired just 5 months earlier to protect the residents of the Uptown Place apartments, was placed under arrest and charged with burglary of an occupied dwelling, sexual battery, and first-degree murder. Now, it took 2 years of gathering evidence, hearings, delays, and jury selection for the trial to finally begin in November of 2017. It was revealed that as a clearly intoxicated Sasha returned home back to her apartment, which would have been the main challenge really, to arrive home safely, Stephen stalked the floors and staircases close to Sasha for nearly 40 minutes, using his own key through several access doors to stay in her vicinity. Under the guise of a professional security guard, Stephen senses an opportunity with an intoxicated and vulnerable, beautiful young woman, well aware that the building's common area hallways are not all covered by surveillance cameras. Once Sasha was in her apartment safe, Stephen could not stop thinking about her, how maybe he, missed his opportunity. So at 5 a.m., he looked up how to pick her door lock. Then shortly after was seen making his way back to her apartment. Around the same time, Sasha sent a text to a man she had been messaging with earlier that night, and all she said in that text was his name, Ben. I think it was at this time she heard someone trying to get into her apartment. Maybe that's why all she managed to text was his name before this someone finally got in. This coincided with a 90-minute time period where Stephen was absent from any security video or any other security-related patrol data. The prosecution put forth that during this time, Stephen bashed, raped, and strangled Sasha to death, then attempted to clean up the crime scene. Abrasions on her thighs also coincided with Stephen's utility belt that he wore as a security guard. During the rape, the belt would have been rubbing against her thighs, causing these marks. Which, if we just stop for a second and think about that, this man was a security guard. The belt was meant to have items to protect people. And that same belt was hurting one of the women he was supposed to protect in this building during a rape. It's wild. Stephen's defense, however, argued that the evidence was not 100. There was a discrepancy in the sizes of the shoe print and then the shoes found in Stephen's home. So the shoe print matched a size 9, but Stephen said he wore a size 10.5. Also, they said there was no footage showing Stephen gaining access to her apartment because there was no cameras there, just him, walking in that direction. They even had the balls to suggest that Stephen and Sasha had consensual sex, and then another guy came in and killed her. Because, that seems legit. That makes sense. However, the DNA, the sus internet search, why would he need to know how to break into Sasha's door lock? The stalking surveillance footage all painted a very crystal clear picture. After only a 7-day trial, it took the jury just 4 hours to deliberate. And the jury found Stephen Duxbury guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of Sasha Samadine, along with additional time for the sexual battery and burglary charges. He is currently incarcerated at the Graceville Correctional Facility in Florida. So I believe the burglary charges were for her phone and purse being missing. Chillingly, in May 2015, a young female resident had accused Stephen of acting sketchy after he followed her back to her apartment while he was working at the Click in Orlando. Further complaints were filed by several women against Stephen, complaining of harassment and that he followed them around the building. Following the trial, Sasha's parents filed a lawsuit against the Uptown Place condominiums building, the security company Vital Security, and the lock manufacturer Spectrum Brands. Stephen had been hired by Vital Security in 2015, and although he passed the state-level FBI background check, they failed to look into Stephen further, given he was the subject of so many residential complaints from Uptown Place. None of these complaints were ever investigated by the managers. The lawsuit stated that the building didn't have enough surveillance video cameras monitoring the common area hallways, and this failure gave Stephen the confidence and created the opportunity for him to break into Sasha's apartment while she was inside without detection or being blocked from doing so. In an article back in 2013, it was reported that quickset locks were defective and could easily be broken into using just a screwdriver. This was the exact same article Stephen accessed on his phone the night of Sasha's murder. Kwikset ultimately redesigned their locks, though they strongly denied that they were ever defective to begin with. Sasha's tragic murder left her parents, Ken and Tara, and her brother Kenny mourning their biggest loss. Ken and Tara now work with the Orange County Victims Advocate Program to help other families deal with grief. Kenny, her brother, obviously had struggled a lot with the death of his sister, and in July 2021, he went on a 6-month journey across the Appalachian Trail with a bright red necktie hung around his backpack in honor of his sister, who loved the color red and loved to dress up. He said, "I can be a little fancy for Sasha." This case really stood out to me because of the fact that she was already home. Stephen had been accused of stalking women many times. The thought that every single time he targeted a woman, this could have been the end result. Sasha was unlucky that night because she was intoxicated, but I don't even buy that because realistically, she was at the building before 2 a.m., somehow in her apartment by 3 a.m., and Stephen didn't break into her apartment until 5 a.m. She definitely would have sobered up a little by that time, so is it really a crime of opportunity? What doesn't make sense to me is that if she was outside the building at 1:46 a.m. before 2 a.m., what was she doing for an hour stumbling out? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Whether you're drunk or not, you know how to get home. And maybe she didn't have her key fob or, forgot the key code. But does that happen? Like, maybe she just was that drunk that she didn't remember it. But couldn't Stephen have just looked up the residential apartment list, and I guess she didn't have ID. So I don't know. I find that whole situation a bit weird. I wanted to look up more into the building and find out why it's so secure, but I guess that's what makes the building really safe. I feel like he saw her drunk from the start and saw it as an opportunity, but then he didn't go ahead with it at 2, 3 a.m. when he escorted her or followed her to her apartment. He didn't push her into her apartment and cause a scene. No, he waited, kept thinking about it, calculated how to break into her apartment, and then did it. So I think he had been kind of attempting this act for months, but finally decided to just do it when Sasha showed up inebriated. Who knows if he even had his eyes on Sasha for the 5 months he worked there. Stephen was a security guard there to keep the tenants of the building safe. And tragically, Sasha's life was taken by someone meant to protect her. Sasha was a beautiful soul who made an impact on all those around her, and now her loved ones can only celebrate the life she once had. It's such a tragic story, and again, I always talk about women coming home safe. People are so sick nowadays, and I feel like we get away with so much more sometimes because there's always excuses made for people. And in this case, Stephen didn't get away with it, thank God, but Sasha died. So no one wins. It's like, man, you can't even be safe at home anymore. She was inside her apartment. I'm sure she was like, whoa, this was a wild night. I'm glad I'm home. And then to hear someone breaking in, like the fear she would have felt is just so scary and heartbreaking to think of. Even here in Australia, the crime is just wild. Like, I feel like I'm constantly checking if my doors are locked and, security is on. It's just like, you don't even feel safe at home anymore. And this case happened 10 years ago and it's only gotten worse. Nothing's gotten better in 10 years. So all we can do is be vigilant. Men or women, we need to make sure that we are safe in our own homes. If you have a key code lock, maybe put something else, maybe put like a physical lock there too. That's what I do. Oh, God. It's going to give me nightmares. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, guys. Have you heard of this case? It's so sad. And 10 years on, her family probably still thinks about it every day. See you guys in the comments and in next week's video. Besitos. Bye.